Thanks for everyone for joining the webinar today. We are revisiting the labor models and just their overall impact throughout the system. Agenda so far, so we're going to walk through the labor models as a refresh. We're going to look at how these affect forecasting, scheduling, and performance. We will touch base on our daily GM approvals, reports, provide some best practices, and end with a Q&A. I do have a couple other co-hosts that are on the call, so they will be helping to field some questions and also be adding in any input or best practices at the end of the call as well. All right, touching base on just labor models in general at first. So in the labor models within the application, this is where you can use different hotel metrics to create the perfect budget by position, by hotel. By default, this page will open showing all budgets currently that are set up for this location. You can also click the service levels to see the breakdown of that tab, which some of you might not be as familiar with. Service levels shows the typical distribution of room cleaning levels per day of the week. So keep in mind, this is only used in forecasting and scheduling calculations. Actual budgets are calculated when actual daily activity from the accounting portion is entered. So this page is where you provide the breakdown of the average distribution of cleaning levels by day of the week. So let me kind of show you what that means. So in here, for example, on average of your total rooms occupied on a Monday, no matter if you've sold 50 rooms or 150 rooms, of those rooms occupied, about 85% of those will typically be stayovers, and only about 15% might be checkouts. On the flip side, so on Sunday, this is typically a very large checkout day. So again, this is only used for forecasting and scheduling, as actuals will pull in actuals for days that are in the past. So this distribution should be adjusted accordingly to each hotel. This is not something that should be edited often, so don't feel like you have to come in here and edit this on a daily basis, maybe just once a year, if that, as the market changes. I know for me, I worked at an airport location, which had a very high checkout rate on a daily basis, whereas something a little bit a different location might be completely different. So make sure that as you're looking at these service levels, you're really thinking about it on a market level and kind of where the majority of the checkouts versus stayovers occur. All right, going back to the labor models. So this is where you enter the budgets per position per hotel. We're really focusing on the hourly associates here as well. There are 6 different model types. You can find out more information on these through the knowledge base, which is located on the very bottom left corner in that question mark. Just by selecting the question mark on the bottom left of the page, it'll take you to the user guide where you can find the labor models. This is going to go into a very detailed level of the different labor models available and kind of how those work. But for now, for today, I'm just going to do a quick refresh of this page and just really how it affects the rest of the system. So going back to labor models page, you can see how in here we have each position budgeted using a combination of different model types. So diving into a few of them, most straightforward one I think for me is just housekeeper. This one is budgeted based off of minutes per cleaned room. MPCR is minutes per cleaned room, because not all occupied rooms are actually cleaned. So this is cleaned rooms. Really, the most important thing in here also is to make sure that you have yesterday selected, because today we're cleaning last night's rooms. So you want to make sure that you have yesterday turned on here. We are going to want to assign these rooms to a specific housekeepers and track that productivity on a housekeeper level. So make sure you leave that on. And then down here is where you establish how long it should take to clean those different cleaning service levels. So in this instance, we have 30 minutes for a checkout or departure and 15 for a stayover. You can edit these. These minutes per cleaned room can be set per hotel as the time it takes more or less time to clean different types of rooms. For example, my examples earlier, I was at a Residence Inn one time, which is going to take a whole lot longer because they have bigger rooms than the Courtyard I was at. So make sure you customize each hotel to the time it should take to clean each of the room types. Here's a straightforward example of a front desk shift. So typically you might have 8 hours in the morning, 8 hours in the afternoon, equaling 16 hours a day. A similar budget is typically set up for night auditors, security, van drivers, really any position that's needed for a set amount of time per day, no matter the occupancy level. So you're low occupancy or high, you need those front desk team members. So that's why that would be a good example for day of the week. My favorite though, and I know everyone that's on the call, it's been on one with me before, I love range of statistics. So the busier you are, the more hours you should have to utilize. So in this example, we have a laundry attendant. Their hours are based off of a range of rooms occupied, because the more that you have occupied, the more laundry you're going to have to do. Again, my laundry attendant today is doing the laundry from last night's rooms occupied. So I, again, have that yesterday selected in that data from section. This is where I have the range. So what this is saying is that if my hotel, which has 120 rooms, if I've sold 0 to 30, they should really only be here for about maybe 5 hours. If we sell 31 to 60, which is that middle range, they got about 6 hours. And then anything above 61 equals 8. So you can add more or less ranges. So you can be a lot more detailed. You can have 2 ranges. It's totally up to you as far as how many ranges you have down here. Here's an example of where you may want to use a range of statistics for additional hours. So this might not be something that anyone's really thought of before. So we already have the 16 hours in the front desk, right? We've got the 8 in the AM, 8 in the PM. But what if it's a super busy night with a ton of check-ins? Here's an example where this would come into play. So in this example, we've now switched it. So this is the data from today. I have my arrivals for today that are going to account for this. What this is saying is that if I've sold 0 to 75 rooms, I have my standard 16 hours. So I've got my 8 a.m., 8 p.m. But now let's add in that second portion of it. If we have 76 arrivals or more, why don't we give an option for additional coverage? We used to have a split shift where someone would come help out for 4 hours of that high peak check-in time. This is where you're allowed to add additional hours on top of those positions. So really being creative with these different labor models, giving it a functionality that really works for the hotel is the end goal. Think about this for other positions. Maybe on high checkout days, you can allow for more hours in laundry or housemen, just as another example. Another option you have in labor models, which you might not have seen before, is that there is a portion related to revenue. So a factor of revenue. Here's how you can set up banquet models based off of revenue codes like banquet F&B or service charges as well. Let's look at how this is going to affect forecast, scheduling, and performance. So all of the labor models that you put into and that you set out in the beginning, plus your forecast, this is what gives you those budgeted hours by position in the schedule, in the performance, in the daily jam approvals. So labor models times the forecast combination is what's going to tell you what that number is on the bottom. So in here, whether you're scheduling or looking at the performance page, ding, ding, best practice here, it's highly, highly recommended to make sure you're looking at these pages by position or department. If at any time you go into the schedule, if you don't like if it's summarized by department, simply change it by position. I know a lot of times, depending on the number of positions that you're scheduling for, it might be even just more beneficial to set it by positions by default. Keep in mind is that we're really here to help you out. So if you always like position, well, then select that and then save that as your default view. So then moving forward, every single time you come into the schedule, it's going to open up in that way that benefits you the most. So you can do this on the schedule and the performance page. It just makes reviewing over or under budget amounts by position so much easier if you have it set up this way. Something we see in here often is that you are constantly having to explain why you're over budget for regular positions. In this example, maybe the PM cook was a new position that was added. I've had a PM cook for months now, yet inflow is always telling me I'm over budget. Like every day, what is this? Well, simply looking at the schedule, I'm scheduling people 6 to 12 hours a day, like my regional told me to do. Like, why do I have to explain that? You're missing a budget. All I need is someone to add a labor model for me when this position is needed. Then I can use this as a guide to know when I need 1 or 2 people or even more on a shift. So keep in mind, if you're ever looking at a schedule and you see that 0 on the bottom, ding, ding, you're missing a budget. You're missing something in the labor model. This happens frequently as positions are added or taken away from hotels. If I were to come in here, add this labor model over here, I'll click the recalculate budget button. That's going to be prompted once as I make changes. And moving forward, I won't have to enter an explanation unless I really am over budget. So there are definitely times when you'll be over budget, like if you have people training, but reviewing each day's overage to understand if this is a labor model change or are we overstaffing? So all of those labor models plus the forecast affect the schedule, performance, and the daily GM approvals. So that basic labor models page just is such a big important piece into this labor management platform that it's really recommended that these are taken a look at and reviewed and making sure that we have the right ones in place. Daily GM approvals. So this is part of the daily GM workflow that should be taken into account on a very frequent basis. These are meant to serve as an overview to look at your potential issues down the road, like wages being over budget compared to revenue or to occupancy. So this daily GM approvals is a super important piece to the GM workflow. Even better, you're able to drill into these daily to find opportunities and wins. These are tools in place to help you. So if you're constantly seeing red, not green, it may be time to revisit the labor models with your corporate team to ensure these are accurate. It may be something that hasn't even been touched in quite some time. Reporting. Labor models also flow into most of the reports as well. The housekeeping assignments for being one of them. This housekeeping assignments report shows how your housekeeping productivity per housekeeper for a range of dates. So it's critical that you have those labor models correct with the cleaning service levels and the amount of time it's taking to clean checkouts and stayovers to have accurate reporting and comparison. The labor flash, the second one right here as an example. This pulls in accounting data for your occupancy, compares it to your labor hours that are compared to the budget. So these are 2 key important reports that are probably one of the most popular ones that are being ran on a comparison to budget. Again, labor models are the base to the labor management module. Without accurate comparisons, the ability to schedule appropriately becomes even more difficult. So make it a practice to review the labor models once or twice a year to ensure you set up the hotels for success and allow the tools provided to really help them. A couple important tips that we've covered. Again, with the labor models, ensuring that the correct data from is selected per position. Typically for housemen, laundry, and breakfast, this would be based on yesterday. I see a lot of clients' pages with this set to today, but unfortunately it should really be yesterday because a lot of those pertain to last night's rooms occupied. So this will be the first place to start when you're reviewing your labor models for me. There will be other different positions that are based off of today, like the arrivals example that we gave you. Again, if you're consistently over budget, but not sure why, the best practice would be to review one day in detail at a time to figure out why. It's much easier to find this out on a more simplified basis, like per position per day, rather than trying to look at the department as a whole for the week. That might be too confusing to unravel. So I highly, highly recommend looking at this, breaking it down on a per position, per day basis. All right. So as a summary, today we walked through labor models just as a refresh. Where does it live? What does it do? How does it affect the rest of the application? It affects forecasting, scheduling, performance. It has such a big piece of the puzzle within the labor management platform. We talked about how it affects daily GM approvals and reports and provided a couple best practices. I wanted to open up for any questions that might have come in or anything that you would have had a question on even before we got started when it pertains to labor models, to see if anyone has anything. Again, feel free in the Zoom chat to use that Q&A session to ask any questions that you might have. One question that always comes in, stated at the beginning, may not have joined quite yet. This is being recorded. We will publish it on the homepage of Inflow. So as soon as you log in, it will be available within that homepage section. Another question is, are my changes to labor models affected retroactively? So if you do make any changes to your labor models today, it will not go into effect, I think, until the next time that you do the schedule. Got some compliments. Thank you for those. Question was, can you set it up that the room sold will automatically think it's sent too early? Reiterate the fact of the labor models. So when you're doing the forecasting, it will pull in what you enter as what your projected forecast is. And then after daily activity is done, so that's on the accounting portion where the night audit information populates, the actual rooms occupied is what pulls into the forecast. So you'll change it to a lock. And all of those labor budgets on the performance and the daily GM approvals, those are calculated based off of your actual rooms occupied, not your forecast once the day is in the past. So again, the schedule really pulls more off of the forecast. The performance tab pulls more off of your actuals from the accounting module. The forecast creates needed positions. Question came in, not exactly sure, so we'll probably reach out to you to get more clarification on that. My co-host can send a reply if they know the answer to it, but we will take a look at that after the call today. All right, those are great questions that came in. If anyone else has any questions that you think of following the call, feel free to reach out to our support team. We can get those addressed. Again, we'll publish this on the homepage when it's available. And as the team gets on and starts looking at your labor models, if you don't have access to it, forgot to mention that, reach out to your corporate team and just say, hey, can we spend 15 minutes going through my labor models? Want to make sure that they are as accurate as possible, because it might not be something that was done or touched on in quite some time. Someone asked if there are suggested room time allowances by brand of hotel. I do not have this information. If you have a contact with your franchise, I would see if it's something that they might have, because I'm sure it changes with the brand standards. We can try to track this information down, but I think it might be more relative or available within the brand if you have a brand contact. All right. Well, thank you everyone for your time today. Really appreciate joining the webinar. We will publish this once available, and everyone have a great rest of your Wednesday. Thank you so much.